absolutely. So what I'm going to do is pass over pretty much straight away for Sophie, Sophie Fleming, who is the Exec Director of the Kavanagh Foundation, who is the principal supporter for this project, to kick us off. So not enough time, I don't think, on the hour for us to all go around. So I will just do a general introductions and welcome to everyone on the call. Thank you for coming along. But I'll pass over to Sophie now.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you all for being here this morning. I know loads of other things are going on that you know, we may or may not be excited about. However, I think the main message from Kavanagh as the main supporter and funder is really that we are incredibly excited. We're excited because we've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Catherine Trebek on the Wellbeing budgeting conceptual work that she will discuss with you. It was an absolute privilege to work with her, but also now with Michael and Jimmy and the team of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. So it's been a real privilege for us, a real learning experience. And from our perspective, this is exactly what we would like you to understand this opportunity to be. It is a privilege. It's exactly the right time. It speaks for you and colleagues who expressed an interest that you are here today. We have an opportunity to make probably the biggest change to the lives of children and families that we've been able to make over the last decade. So it's time for doing things rather than talking about them, which is why I'll keep things brief now and hand over to the people who are actually doing the work. But just to say that from our perspective, we're delighted to support. We would like that support to be ongoing. And we hope that you grasp this opportunity. So thank you for being here. And if there's anything the Kavanagh Trust can do to support you in your work beyond, then obviously we'd love to hear from you as well. So I'll hand back to Michael as the Master of Ceremony with a big thank you.
Lovely, thanks very much, Sophie. Yeah, so it is that moment, I think, from moving from talking to action and legislation and opportunities, and just there's a wonderful confluence of sort of influences and events which has taken us to this point, and I think it provides a real opportunity. And ultimately, I mean, this call is an invitation to join us on that journey, and we'll be talking more as we go through these short presentations what that might actually mean for you as a local authority. But without further ado, I want to pass across to my colleague in the WEAL team, Catherine Trebek, who Sophie already name-checked and was the key author for this report that came out quite recently on children's wellbeing budgeting. She's going to give us a little bit of a sort of a summary of that and situating that in the wellbeing economy context. So Catherine, if I can pass over to you.
Thanks, Michael, and good morning, everyone. Really wonderful to see you. I also have an apology, not a dog, but we're getting carpet laid next door. So I've got sort of all my bedroom furniture right behind me. So not the most professional of backdrops. My apologies for that. I'm going to just take a minute to really just talk about the idea of a wellbeing economy and the role of budget in that. I mean, the simplest way we found to describe what a wellbeing economy is, that it's about social justice on a healthy planet, and which is nice, simple distillation of the goal and the vision. But of course, as you all know and appreciate, that requires an extraordinary amount of change in terms of how we structure and design and purpose our economic system. We need changes in how we tax, what we subsidize, how we price things, business models, how we design our cities, how we do decision-making, infrastructure, and so on and so on. This is an enormous shift, but it's ultimately about reorientating our economic system so that it's in service of what people and planet really need. On our website, we've got a table that's a live table, people adding to it, and it's called From the Old Way, New Way. And what it does is essentially looks at a whole lot of different areas of life, economy, education, living, all sorts of things. And it says, here's how the old paradigm would respond to those areas. And here's how things might look in a wellbeing economy. And essentially it's created and designed to give people at a glance sense of how things might change in a wellbeing economy. And so just to give you a few examples in terms of how we teach economics, the old way is very narrow, neoclassical way of teaching. In the new way, it will be pluralistic, taking into account ecosystems and feminist economics and so on. One of the other lines we have there is about the food system, and the old way we would have prices ignore the cost of production and their environmental impact, and we'd have workers and producers at the beck and call of wider markets. In the new way, we'd have seasonal production, we'd have producers paid fairly, we'd have local food production. Another example is homes and housing. The old way is that they're so often rationed by price and used as investment devices by rent seekers. In the new way, they would be designed to serve and be in harmony with nature. So they'd be eco-design, there'd be co-housing and sustainable and community-owned housing. And through the work that I've been doing over the last few months with Sophie and Amy and the Carnegie Trust and Children in Scotland, looking at what a wellbeing budget for children might look like in Scotland, I guess we could add to that table that the old way in terms of children's wellbeing would be interventions that are focused very narrowly on the child and perhaps the family as the unit of analysis and where the onus of change needs to happen. And the word intervention, I think, is quite telling there that you've seen a lot of that literature intervening at the child in a way that ignores the community in which these families and their carers live, that ignores the macroeconomy and the pressures of poverty and inequality and the nature of the labour markets. And the old way for government budgets would be that they're short-term annual cycles, they're about servicing so much of the harm that's currently being done to our children and families, rather than looking upstream and investing in prevention and connecting across all the different pieces of the system that influence outcomes for children and their families. And so the new way there would be seeing that juncture of government budgets as a key mechanism, a juncture in which we can shift to a wellbeing economy. And so as we say in the report, which I'll share the link in the chat in a minute, a wellbeing budget is about rights, it's about participation, it's about thinking long stream and taking into account all those nested levels of influences that impinge on a family's ability to create circumstances for children to thrive. So it's about harnessing that budget to do government and governance differently in a way that shapes the wider economy, in a way that creates the circumstances and the context in which children and their families can thrive. And I just want to leave you with this comment that we start one of the chapters in the report about it's been attributed, I can't find the exact source, but it's been attributed to Martin Luther King, that government budgets are moral documents with numbers attached. And so this wellbeing economy approach really understands the the crucial moment of a government budget to really put our money where our hearts are in terms of investing in the circumstances that our children need to thrive. Thanks so much, Michael.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Catherine. But of course, you've been invited this morning to a presentation or a set of presentations which focuses on not just well-being, but children's rights as well. And the interconnection between the two is very, very clear. And what we're looking at with this work is that we are looking to sort of help work with a local authority on both of these issues simultaneously, because we don't see them as separate. We see them as sort of combined and reinforcing of each other. And so with that in mind, we have with us Juliet Harris from Together, who is going to just bring the children's rights and the legislation that's coming down the tracks and that side of the story to this morning presentation. So if I can pass on to you, Juliet.
Thank you, Michael. And I'm going to try to share my screen, which is rather brave. Are you seeing my presentation at the moment or not?
Yeah, we can. It's not in presenter mode, but we can see it. Yeah.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me just try and get this right. And if it doesn't work, I shall just stop here. So I'm bravely now working on two different screens. And so, okay, so is that the first slide working there?
Yes, perfect. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. And yeah, thank you, Catherine and Sophie and Michael. This is just such an exciting time for this piece of work with the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. Because, I mean, like Michael says, then really rights and well-being, they're not separate concepts. Really, if you respect children and young people's rights, you therefore improve their well-being. And so I think using and drawing in the expertise of Catherine and Michael and the Wellbeing Economy Alliance to ensure that public bodies fulfill their new duties under the UNC Incorporation Bill is absolutely key. And so really, like everyone said so far, it's time to move from talking to action. And the timing for this work is absolutely perfect. So as you'll know, on March the 16th, the Scottish Parliament unanimously passed the landmark UNCRC Incorporation Bill, which makes children's human rights binding in law for the first time in Scotland. And like I said, rights and well-being, they're not just linked, they're fundamental to each other. If you ensure the rights of children and their families are respected and protected, as a result, their well-being will improve. I mean, I'd say, in fact, that perhaps the only way we can improve the well-being of children and their families is to make sure that their rights are respected. Their rights to the highest attainable standard of health, the right to an adequate standard of living, the right to food, the right to housing, the right to be listened to, the right to social security. These rights are all about improving the well-being of children and their families. So why is the UNCRC Incorporation Bill quite so important for improving well-being? Well, so far to date, children's rights have only been guiding on all levels of government. So the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child has been something that Scottish Government, local authorities, other public bodies need to kind of think about rather than do. And like Michael said, it's time to move from thinking, it's time to move from talking to actually doing. And so while we know that huge progress has already been made in Scotland to embed rights-based approaches, there is recognition that we must do more. I love the slide that I'm showing you at the moment. I wanted to show you because it's something that children and young people talk to us about. They drew this slide to say that at the moment they know that they've got rights, but they're like clouds in the sky. And if they jump on a trampoline, if they're on each other's shoulders, if they're on a crane, they still just see the rights, but they don't experience them in everyday life. They don't always, they'll know that they've got the right to be listened to, the right to be safe, but that's not always their experience every day. So I think this work with the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, this work with the UNCRC Incorporation Bill is really our chance to make sure that children and young people can feel and experience their lives in all aspects of, their rights in all aspects of their lives. And I think the UNCRC Incorporation Bill is a way of locking into legislation to make sure that this happens. So like I said, the bill makes children's rights binding on all levels of government. And so it means that children's rights have to be at the centre of everything that we do, not just children's services, but education, health, social work, transport, policing, the environment, absolutely everything that Catherine was speaking about in her presentation. It means that they're not just something we think about, but something that we embed in everything we do. So it's a significant step forward in securing a wellbeing economy for Scotland. The bill itself includes provisions on children's rights budgeting. It includes what's known as a children's scheme. And I know this is something that might sound kind of a bit geeky or a bit techy, but it really provides a powerful tool to influence what steps all levels of government take to embed children's rights into budgeting and ensure their well-being. So through the children's scheme, Scottish Government will have to report on what they've done and what they plan to do to consider children's rights in the budget process. In doing this, they'll also have to consider what the UN committee has said about children's rights budgeting through its recommendations and through what are known as general comments. Through section 6 of the bill, the duty to comply, public bodies will need to take a children's rights approach to budgeting too, that secures the well-being of children, families and the communities that they live in. But what is a rights-based approach to budgeting and how does it contribute to a well-being economy? Well, the UNCRC, as you'll know, sets out 42 substantive rights for children and young people, many of which are actually realised through their families, so through support for families. It puts an obligation on government to fulfil children's rights to an adequate standard of living, the highest attainable standard of health, education, food, as I've said before. The test of whether these rights are actually being met is whether children and families can live in dignity. I've spoken to Catherine about this before, but when I think of dignity, I always think about a Children's Parliament project that you might have heard of, where they invented a dignometer. And it's a bit like a barometer, but rather than forecasting the weather, it actually forecasts the impact that something has on children's sense of dignity. So children from the Children's Parliament use the dignometer to identify things that have a positive impact on their feelings of dignity. Things like being listened to and taken seriously, being protected and cared for, having shelter, feeling safe, getting extra help when they need it, being encouraged and supported at school, and even people saying that you're good at your hobbies. So Children's Parliament use the dignometer as well to identify things that have a positive impact on their feelings of dignity. Things like feeling cold, feeling hungry, feeling discriminated, feeling poor, feeling homeless, they all have a negative effect on children's sense of dignity. So clearly the dignometer helps to forecast whether or not the rights of children and their families are being met. And it's a really simple way to actually think about the principle of children's rights budgeting, because this is the test of whether we're achieving a wellbeing economy. If people are cold, if children are hungry, if they're not feeling respected at school, if their housing is not in good condition, it affects their feeling of dignity, and it means that money isn't being directed in the right way to secure the rights of children and young people. The UN committee has principles of children's rights budgeting that are a little more complex than the dignometer, but they do achieve the same result. The principles include the importance of planning well, so making sure that you have the information and data that you need to know where children's rights aren't being met and when children and families aren't able to live in dignity. The principles also include the importance of participation, of involving children and their families in decisions about where and how budgets are allocated. You need to give children and their families the dignity of sharing their views and experiences if you're going to know how to budget wisely and how to budget effectively. The UN principles also emphasise the importance of including children with additional support needs. They're clear that to ensure equality, you may need to spend more money on ensuring the rights of some children than you do on others. And finally, importantly, the UN principles remind us that investing in children has to be seen as a long-term investment, and investing in families is a really important way of securing children's rights. So in this way, the UNCRC Incorporation Bill gives us a really powerful tool to make sure that the rights of children and their families are respected and fulfilled. And in a nutshell, bringing together the UNCRC Incorporation Bill with this work on a wellbeing economy means that children's human rights will really be at the centre of all budgetary decisions. And I share Sophie's optimism that this is really a point of change where we can identify the best way of creating a wellbeing economy that secures the rights, secures the dignity of children and families right across Scotland in a way that really promotes the wellbeing of Scotland as a country. I shall stop sharing my screen now and pass back to Michael.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Juliet. Gosh, what beautiful images in that presentation there. So hopefully with these short presentations, you're starting to sort of build a picture in terms of the connection, the interplay between a wellbeing economy and how children's rights sit right at the centre of that. As I said at the top of the call, this genuinely is an opportunity to share with you this emerging space that we need to step into collectively, and also present you with the opportunity that Katanach and other funders have kindly provided for us to go on a journey together to explore how we in fact do this children's wellbeing rights budgeting work, given the fact that this needs to become an established part of budgeting in Scotland. So I would encourage you, as I said at the beginning, if there are any questions that are coming up in your minds, given the fact that at the end of this, we will literally be inviting you to sort of come back to us to see whether or not you as a local authority would like to go on this journey with us. do drop in questions into the chat box as and when they come up. Okay, so the final presentation before we get to Q&A is one that I'm going to give you, and that is on behalf of Wheels Scotland. And I should give a little shout out here to the new director of Wheels Scotland, Jimmy Paul, who's on the call here. If you want to give us a wave, Jimmy, for those of you who are in gallery view, you saw that. And Jimmy comes very much from this space, so he's a tremendous asset. And this work will be being taken forward under the auspices of Wheels Scotland, but it's really a partnership. And I would like to encourage whichever sort of local authorities are interested in moving forward this, to think of this as, you know, we're going on this journey together and we're catalyzing this space for the full range of stakeholders that need to be involved if this is to be participatory, if this genuinely is to meet the needs of children. So without further ado, I'm just going to share my screen and see if I can find the presentation. There we go. Okay, so if someone could give me a thumbs up and tell me if it's full screen. Yeah, it's full screen. Okay, excellent. Wonderful. Okay, so as you can see at the bottom of the slide here, this particular project is being funded and supported very generously by two key foundations, the Catherine Foundation, as well as Partners for a New Economy. And it's such an interesting and exciting opportunity that I think we have here, because it genuinely is a coming together of many different needs and desires in one particular project. And that project we're sort of currently referring to as the Children's Budgeting in a Scottish Wellbeing Economy. So, let me just see how to move this. There we go. Okay, so Catherine already touched on this, but I don't think it's remiss to sort of just reinforce the point, sort of what is the economy, if that's not a stupid question. And I don't think there is a sort of more eloquent, simple way of describing the economy than this. The economy is the way we produce and provide for one another. And I think it's important, both of those, the words particularly, way, produce and provide, because it's not just material goods that we provide to each other. We provide care, we provide support, we provide love, we provide education. There are many different ways that enhance our life. The economy can enhance our life depending on the way that we do it. Now, under the current economic system, I think there's quite a lot of evidence to suggest that we're not doing it in the optimal way in order to really provide what we all in the room would like to see, and what we're particularly focused on with this programme, which is the flourishing of all children in Scotland. So we really want to tackle with this project the way we provide for one another. And in a wellbeing economy, as Catherine said, a wellbeing economy, we want to explore the ways we can provide in order to deliver that social justice. But with a wellbeing economy, it's not just social justice, it's not just for us as a species, it has to be on a healthy planet, it has to be within, you know, because otherwise we are in effect sort of, it's that Peter and Paul, taking from one, giving to the, you know, if we're sort of improving ourselves at the cost of the planet, it's only going to come back and bite us. So we really, this is all about exploring together the way that we produce children's rights and well-being. And we have this amazing vehicle, the budgetary process, to explore that in. But the reason I started off with those slides in terms of the way we produce, I just really want to hammer this point that to achieve what we all want to achieve in terms of children's well-being and rights is not exclusively the job of a budget. There are many different actors, there are many different resources that can be brought into supporting children's well-being and children's rights. The budget is one tremendous vehicle, but we need to, and we will look to, with this project over the next 12 to 15 months, we will look at all the types of resources that all stakeholders have the assets and the capabilities to deliver, to support. We're going to be looking at all of the stakeholders that surround the life of a child and what they can do to support that child's flourishing. Not only, it's just the responsibility of local authority and spending via children's budgets. It's not that. As Juliet has already articulated, that legislation is going to touch upon all types of spending, cutting across from health to education to children's services. So there's this tremendous opportunity to bring collective, joined up working together. But let's move on a little bit more to how we are looking to potentially do policy making and budgeting differently. And just to sort of highlight the old way, new way that Catherine also touched on. Standard policy making. We have this sort of model set up in the current economic system where we look to grow the economy in order to use taxes to get some of that wealth to then just try and fix the damages done to people on the planet. We're sort of needing to grow the economy to grow the sticking plasters because the wounds are becoming ever greater, which seems absolute madness. Why are we doing this? Surely this is not an inefficient use of resources. This is not an efficient use of taxes. Surely we would be better to think about how can we move from fixing, healing and redistributing to getting it right in the first place. So, you know, you probably already, the pennies dropped that this is all about pre-distribution. This is all about not doing the damage, making the growth, making the money to fix it, but actually trying to get it right in the first place, because that'll help us in so many ways. And we have this tremendous tool available to us to help us on this journey. This is a policy guide, a Wellbeing Economy Policy Design Guide that we launched just last month. And what's so exciting is that it's been a co-creation of scores and scores of our members across the world. And over the next 12 to 15 months, we're looking to pilot this guide across the world. And luckily enough, Scotland is going to be one of our 4 key pilot sites alongside California, Canada, and New Zealand, as well as other policymakers who are coming to us from Brazil and South Africa and the Netherlands, who are also very, very keen to be involved with this. So what this provides is this pilot, the pilot of the policy guide, focusing in on children's wellbeing and rights in Scotland, gives the local authority we'll work with the opportunity to be part of an international network of learning as we explore how to do policy making, and in the case of this project, budget making in a different way, okay? And that different way very much talks to the principles that Catherine articulated, also the UN panel principles for rights, in that this is genuinely participatory, strength-based, holistic, but also experimental. We're going on an exploratory journey with you. We're learning with you how to do wellbeing budgeting differently. And, you know, we can't tell you exactly what the end destination is. We want to find that and discover that together. It's a slightly scary approach, but an emergent approach is the only one, I think, which will allow new thinking into the space. So these are the 7 principles that support the wellbeing economy policy design. And this policy design guide has 5 key elements to it. If you look at the guide, and we can drop it into the chat, the link, there are sort of sequential steps from vision, strategy, policies, implementation, and evaluation. But the beauty of it is it's not just about following a step-by-step, you know, water manual type thing. You know, we can dip into this with all kinds of tips and methodologies and suggestions at different points, because all of these components are interconnected. But just to focus on a few of these, because we will look to the guide in order for inspiration to co-design with the local authority who we work with the process of, in effect, practicing wellbeing economy and children's rights budgeting. We will look to this guide, and there are some sort of steps which I think would be useful to highlight at this particular moment. They are, firstly, the development of a wellbeing vision, a wellbeing economy vision. This is where we would look to in the practicalities of this project come the summer, once we've established our partnership with the local authority that we'll look to work with, and all of the connections with the various stakeholders that we need, that we would have children at the center of this first part, really developing the vision, understanding what matters for their well-being and their rights. And of course, we have tremendous stuff. We have all of the rights as laid out in the UNCRC, and we have principles of well-being, but we want to hear directly the voices of those children and stakeholders in the locality that we're going to be piloting this guide in, directly from the horse's mouth, if you like. So that is our starting point for then working through the next stages, which are, you know, to figure out actually what is the strategy that needs to be implemented or created in order to meet that vision, if you like. And there are multiple things that we need to consider here. We need to think about a range of wellbeing economy activities and behaviours. We're not just looking at how the money is spent by children's services. We're looking at all of the different types of budget streams, but we're looking again, as I said, at the different actors that affect a child's life. if parents don't have work which is complement or conducive to them being able to provide the love and the support and the time for a child to thrive, then perhaps we need to be exploring what are the employment conditions of parents of these children in a particular space. So this is just a little example of what I mean, that we're going to be breaking the conversation out in this project beyond just the sort of confines of children's budgeting to explore all of those influences on a child's well-being and rights. So we'll be looking at activities and behaviours. We'll be looking at the alignment of institutions and stakeholders, because as I said, we All Scotland, all of the other actors who are gunning for this work and really looking to support it, as well as the local authority, are catalysts on behalf of these key stakeholders to co-create this process. So we need to look at our alignment and how that supports that. But then, of course, we'll have to manage trade-offs and power dynamics. There is a budget at the end of the day, and we all know that there will be trade-offs in budgets. So how do we actually manage that process? There's some great examples in the guide how to do that. And then just lastly, assessing and selecting wellbeing economy policies, because if we have a vision, we've developed a strategy, then we need to actually explore what are the policies, what are the budgets, lines that could support that strategy and ultimately the vision. And there will, of course, be existing policies, and we'll be looking to assess and reform them in the process, but potentially co-creating new wellbeing economy policies as well. Okay, so this really is a journey of exploration. We have this guide as a tremendous tool, and this really, as I said, is an invitation for you to step forward if you are excited and would like to join us on this journey. And this journey is a journey that will take us probably from around June of this year through till around April, May, June of next year. So around 12 months, whereby we'll be looking to step through this process in line with your own existing policies and processes. And, you know, we're not looking to duplicate what we are looking for a commitment in terms of resources, in terms of time, in terms of vision, in terms of supporting this idea. We're not looking for financial sort of resources. We have those in place for this project. But we do, of course, recognize that people have the day jobs, and there's some really good stuff going on at the moment. So we want to sort of see where we can dovetail. So while we already have a sort of an idea as to how we might run very co-creative sessions to be able to arrive at the types of wellbeing economy policies that will achieve children's rights and well-being, we are also cognizant of what is already in place and want to work with the grain as opposed to sort of in addition to or against, if you like. I think I had a couple of other slides, but you know what, I'm just going to stop there given the time we're at. And just to say, as I said, it is genuinely an invitation for you after this call, if you've been excited by what you've heard, to contact us. And we've got a form that we're going to send out straight after the call, which is just a simple kind of form with 4 questions, just asking, you know, if you would like to come on board, how might you like to sort of, you know, work with us, if you like. And resources, while we have some, we can't work with everyone. So the plan is that we would look to partner with a local authority, really putting this into practice. So going into action mode. However, for all those other local authorities that are still very interested in this, we're looking to develop a set of webinars so that in real time we can keep everyone in the learning journey as we go on it over the next 12 months. So I'm going to stop there, and we're up to now 20 to the hour. So I think we should now move to Q&A. So I'm just going to ask Amy. I haven't been able to look at the chat at all. So are questions coming through, or any themes, or should we simply just open it up for questions as people have them now?
I think we've just got one question from Lorraine Paisley, which Catherine's spoken to, and she's asked, she's recognised that this sits really well with participatory budgeting, and she's asked if there are any examples of participatory budgeting, to which Catherine in the chat has recognised and said, yes, participatory budgeting is at the centre, and there's examples in the Wellbeing budget report. But I think she's mentioned that Juliet might also be able to speak to this and give some examples of where participatory budgeting has been involved with children's wellbeing. So maybe we'll kick off with that question, then people can keep putting questions in the chat now.
Okay, great. So Juliet, is that an invitation to Juliet to jump in? Juliet.
Thank you, Michael and Amy. That's easy. I was trying to type away an answer there, and I'm not very good at typing away in chat, so apologies about that. I can't give specific examples of participatory budgeting because I would say that participatory budgeting is kind of one part of human rights budgeting. And I know there's been a number of really good projects across Scotland, but I can't think of any at the moment. But what I would say is the way that we look at a kind of a rights-based approach to budgeting, as Michael said, is about bringing in the panel principles. So it's about participation, accountability, non-discrimination, empowerment, and legality. And this is making sure that like all of these principles are across the budgetary process. So I can share some papers that I've got. There's been some good kind of international examples that I can share from a paper from Laura Lundy in Ireland, where she includes participatory budgeting as part of this kind of overall framework of human rights budgeting, and actually gets children's views on what they need to participate effectively in the budgetary process. And so I'll share that paper in chat. But I think something that we need to reflect on today is this project is very much an opportunity to be at the leading edge, where we bring together participatory budgeting with equality budgeting, gender budgeting, rights-based budgeting. All of this comes together under the remit of rights and wellbeing budgeting. And so that we really can take a holistic approach to how local authorities spend their money to support children and young people's wellbeing. So I think that this is the opportunity to come up with the real example of how we can bring all these different strands together. But I'll put the link into chat in case you find that useful.
Wonderful, thank you, Juliet. I mean, that's a really good point. You know, we know of a good amount of the work that's going on across Scotland in this space, but I do think this is a really unparalleled opportunity to sort of cut your teeth right at the cutting edge, if you like, if that's not too many cuttings in one sentence, and be in a really good position when the legislation is coming into place, and being prepared for it and not needing to scrabble around, because you've not just heard about it, you've actually rolled your sleeves up and had the opportunity to practice it. And I think that's what we're so excited about, for sure. Okay, so thanks, Julia. I just see that's gone in there. Given the fact that, so there weren't a whole host of questions necessarily in the chat, let's just throw it open to anyone who has a question. So if you'd like to put your hand up, you may need to come off video onto video for that, if you're not currently on video. But would anyone like to ask any questions about anything any of the presenters have said, or this project in particular?
Michael, if no one's coming in, do you want to explain a bit more about the process of what we're looking for from local authorities in terms of the engagement? Because that might help folk think about, could this apply to their local authority, and then how they go about putting their hand up to be a partner on this project.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Catherine. So while we have sketched out, and I didn't share it with you today because I thought it was too much probably detail for the time that we had, a sort of an idea of a plan of action. In a nutshell, what we're looking to do is firstly engage with a local authority who's super keen, who have, I think, the visionary buy-in at the highest level and the commitment to say, you know what, we know this is serious. We know this is going to require time from staff across the local authorities, and not just in the Children's Services Department, and we are willing to provide that space for them to interact in a meaningful way. Because, at the moment, as the way we've designed it, but it's all there to be co-designed and contextualized once we've identified which local authority wishes to sort of come on this journey with us. We are sort of at this stage looking to sort of build trust with all of the stakeholder groups in the local authority in, say, the months of June, July. So in a nutshell, what we'd look to need from the local authority is we'd be needing to work with a point of contact who can reach out to all of the relevant stakeholders that we need to establish relationships with, so that perhaps if we come to September, and there's a sort of reason to this in that hopefully the vaccine program will permit the sort of engagement sessions which finally allow us to come together as opposed to online. So by starting in that process in September, it buys us a little bit more time, but also the school holidays are finished. So hopefully everyone's routine is back into sort of place, and it allows for children and parents and other stakeholders to be engaged in a meaningful way. We would look perhaps to run a set of 6 or 7 sessions. At the moment, we're sort of inspired by the design of the Citizens Assembly approach. So perhaps we would put a Saturday aside every 3 weeks where we would go in depth into different stages of the policy design guide process. Firstly, starting off with the vision, or if there is already tremendous work that's already been done with children in the local authority on vision, then perhaps just reappraising that and setting that up to then move on to strategy. As I said, it's not about rigidly following the guide. It's about finding where the guide can complement the work that's already done, and also potentially put a different lens on that as well. So perhaps 6 sessions, 6 Saturdays, 1 every 3 weeks, so stretching, say, between September and around February. We would bring the resources in terms of the design of those sessions, the facilitation of those sessions, but we would need to work with the local authority as a joint catalyst to bring the stakeholders in as equal partners. So this is not a we all and local authorities telling this is us putting oxygen underneath their voices so that everyone is brought into that space and is a genuinely participatory co-design one. So that will require a lot of sort of communication with the local authority. It will require, at particular moments and particular sessions, a multitude of representatives from different departments within that local authority to sort of come into the picture and to share their knowledge and experience and hear and listen. And, you know, as we go towards, and of course this would also be contextual, finding out what the budget timelines and the specifics are for the local authority, making sure that we weave and work in with that process too. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more of an idea as to what the involvement might be. But I see one hand, and I am just, Jacqueline, it's J Pepper, and I'm just going to check on the list what your first name was. So Jacqueline, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, my system calls me Jacqueline, but most people know me as Jackie. So my question is about, I suppose it's twofold. The first one is about stakeholders, and that actually, when working with local authorities, the local politicians, the elected members are key to this. And we're in a position where we're going through an election, and there's likely to be some significant changes there. So some of the key personnel may not be the same as we move into the time frame that you're talking about. So it's about engagement with elected members, because without their complete buy-in, then it's not going to happen. And the second part of my question was about that engagement process, and because you've described about working with local authorities, but I'm thinking that might be best kicked off or started in a more local community focus, and that you start from there rather than thinking about the whole local authority. And Perth and Kinross is a mix of small urban settlements and very large rural communities. So it's geographically complex, but I just wondered what your thoughts were on that in terms of something that starts in a quite, could be confined, what might seem to be quite small local context, and build out from there.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you for the questions, Jackie. I mean, really excellent ones. On your first one, in terms of the elected officials, yes, of course, there's something else happening today which may sort of stir the pot and move things around. We made a deliberate choice not to invite anyone from Scottish Government into this particular call. We wanted to make it a call at the local authority level because we wanted to work at that level. And in working at that level, when we together form a partnership with one local authority to go on this journey together, for sure, we will be looking to work with you to figure out what is the correct context? What are the wards? We're not just looking across the local authorities. Some of the local authorities in Scotland are vast geographically and have quite different urban, rural sort of distributions of their populations, and therefore different contexts. So for sure, we'll look to start small. That's the reason why we're firstly focusing in at the local government level, because we then have the ability to perhaps take it a little bit more specific within a local authority. But by having these webinars and support of COSLA in order to get the message out, hopefully we can have many more sharing that journey as we go on it, and we can replicate. And then of course, for sure, we'll need to bring those elected officials and ScotGov officials into the story once we've established who the relationship is going to be directly with. Jimmy, I don't know if you want to drop in any reflections, given your sort of tremendous experience of working at the local level and reflecting on Jackie's sort of second point in particular.
Yeah, I thought it was a great point. Thank you, Jackie, for that. And yes, just to say hello and lovely to meet you all this morning. It's been great to listen in, hear your questions and reflections. So yes, I've come from the children's sector. I worked there for over 4 years. I was also a part of the Independent Care Review. But actually the first reflection I'll offer is this work aligns so closely to the promise. And I know all local authorities are completely signed up to realising the promise. And I think this will really accelerate that work. So I just wanted to reflect on that. And to your point, Jackie, I used to work at an organisation called CELSIS, the Centre for Excellence for Children's Care and Protection. And the change programme I was involved in, you couldn't do it without locating it in the specific context and finding out about all of the partners that were essential to children in that area or in those areas. So absolutely, we need to work alongside health, education, third sector, Children's Hearing Scotland, and many others. So a huge part of the start of this project is absolutely identifying those partners and finding ways to work with them, alongside them, and getting behind that vision that Michael was talking about.
Becky, can I ask whether or not we've addressed your first question? I mean, the elected officials, obviously there's Scott government elections literally today, so that potentially is going to change up that level. But as we put out the request at the end of this call to you all to say, would you like to come on the journey with us? Please fill out this form to say why you think you'd be a great partner. Is that going to be doable between now and when I provisionally asked for responses, which is the 20th of May? At the local authority level, will there be sufficient clarity, do you think? Or do you think it's because the higher level MSPs for, say, Perth and Kinross may not be sort of embedded or in place that there might be an issue?
No, I suppose that, you know, it's really about the local administration and elected members and the engagement in some of the decision making around this, because I think, yes, they would be really key to the vision and the buy-in across the board. So I don't think at that strategic level it's possible. I mean, I think you can experiment, but I think if this is about a whole system change to how we manage our money, if you like, and focus that on in a different way, and the processes have to be different, because the budget setting processes within local authorities will have to change, so their engagement in that is key from the outset. So I suppose about the timing, it depends on how swiftly and how quickly you can get that understanding and engagement at a strategic level within the local authority with chief officers and, I think, key elected members.
Okay, so I mean, so within the, so apologies here, but just for clarification purposes, within the local authority, are you saying things will change within the administration? The MSPs may change, but within the local authority, the, say, leadership of that will necessarily change?
No, it's just that the locally, their attentions are actually taken up with that right now. Whether that might change their position, that's what they're focused on just now. So, for example, we might have had a meeting planned to talk about something really important, but it actually only takes 15 minutes, and it might have taken 4 hours previously. That's because they're engaged in the whole election process.
Okay, well,
Michael, so reading between the lines, I think the 20th of May for a deadline for our colleagues on this call to have the conversations they might need to have, and get that in, even just in principle buy-in feels tight. So you might need to give them a bit more of a time to have necessary conversations. And I mean, we know how hard it is to set up key meetings for those sorts of things and get approval. So
okay, thanks for that point then, Jackie. Duly noted, and I'll change that. Juliet, do you want to come in? I think Joanna Smith as well. I just want to recognise that you had said that you wanted to also raise your hand. Juliet, quick.
Yeah, just to come in on this, then absolutely, through the work that we've done on child rights impact assessments with local authorities, we know that it's absolutely key to have buy-in from elected members. And as part of the UNCRC incorporation bill, then we're going to be doing some work with the Improvement Service and the Observatory of Human Rights Scotland to really try and raise awareness of actually the legal obligations that will be coming in around the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and incorporation. And I think that this actually might work quite well. It'll be a kind of two-pronged approach, that if we can make sure that in the work that we're doing to raise awareness of UNCRC incorporation among elected members, we really stress how wellbeing budgeting, rights-based budgeting is a key part of complying with the new bill, then I think that that will kind of place a sense of urgency on elected members, where they realise this is something that they want to do, but also they do have to do to a certain extent because of the new bill. And so perhaps if kind of we have a conversation with Michael and Catherine afterwards, we can really see how we can integrate the work that's being done to raise awareness of UNCRC incorporation with elected members with the concept of wellbeing budgeting, and really try and get that buy-in from elected members, because I completely agree with what was said, and it is key to ensure that something does actually happen, take place.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Julia. And I will push out that date perhaps to the end of the month. I don't want to push it too much further, because we do want to, there's an opportunity in a window here. But Joanna, you have been patiently waiting. Do you want to come in? And we've just got a couple of minutes, so if you can keep it relatively tight.
Thanks very much. Joanne Smith, UNSPCC Scotland. And Jimmy very helpfully kind of answered my question really about the fit with reform of children's services through the care review. And I think that's really significant, because that is a driver, and there's a big expectation in local bodies to be quickly moving to implement the recommendations within that. And I think actually the care review has political will and also a level of public attention that perhaps the UNCRC incorporation doesn't have at a kind of population level. So that might be another useful way of framing it, is that these changes are afoot, and this is an opportunity for us to get on the front foot of that work. And there's an accountability to the government and to local decision makers around the care review that isn't as graspable, I think, with UNCRC. So that's just a thought.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Joanna. And thank you for sharing that in this space, because, you know, in the conversations we've had with all of those who are pushing in this direction, there are so many good initiatives, and none of them, with no exceptions, have said this is not a great idea and this aligns and this will support these other initiatives that are going forward. Now, we are starting to lose people, which indicates that we are coming up close to the hour, and many people have probably put in a 10 o'clock meeting. So I'm just going to thank again Sophie, Juliet and Catherine, Amy as well, for all of their contributions today. Thank you all for coming on this call. We really appreciate it. And as I said, I'll be sending out that in the next hour, an invitation to just a simple form, fill out why do you think your council would be spot on to come on this journey with us, and hopefully we'll then take that conversation forward when we receive those in by the end of the month. Thank you all for coming this morning, and well, happy voting day. So bye for now.